Well, hello everyone, and on behalf of Lloyd's Register Foundation, a very warm welcome to today's webinar to talk about our World Risk Poll report, a world of waste, risk and opportunities in household waste management. My name is Philippa Charlton. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and member of the executive team of Lloyd's Register, which is wholly owned by Lloyd's Register Foundation. And before I introduce our very esteemed panelists, just a very brief bio from me. And the super relevance to being able to moderate this panel is before I joined Lloyd's Register, I spent 3 years working at one of the world's largest waste management companies, focusing particularly in Africa and the Middle East as their CMO, and have very much experienced firsthand the impact and value of something as simple as a clean street. Walking through Congo Brazzaville and seeing the flourish of shops, the children going to school, people being able to play safely in the street. I've also seen the challenges of managing food waste in the Middle East, stood on the side of a sanitary landfill in South Africa and seen the production of electricity for local villages. So it's a topic very close to my heart. And as I said, we're very lucky to have esteemed panelists from the world of waste on the call. So let me just start with our first one, and Nancy Hay, who's the Director of Evidence and Insight at Lloyd's Register Foundation, and she's going to be sharing with you the presentation from the World Risk Report. I'm also delighted to welcome Takahiro Natomura-san, Head of the International Environmental Technology Centre at the United Nations Environmental Programme, who's worked very closely with the Foundation in the support of the development of this report. Another very warm welcome to Carlos Silva Filho. I've been practicing that, who's a global waste management expert. Until just last week was the president of the International Solid Waste Association. And last but absolutely not least is Vishal Kumar. He's the CEO of Waste Warriors, an NGO working to tackle the challenge of uncontrolled waste in the Indian Himalayas. So as I said, a very established and professional panel for you this afternoon. So we're going to start today's panel with Nancy's presentation, and then we're going to follow with some discussions amongst us, some questions, and then we're going to move to questions hopefully from you all. So we're going to keep relatively tight to time, just got 60 minutes today. You have got the opportunity to ask questions. You can type them into the questions panel on the GoToWebinar control panel. No need to wait. You can go ahead and put them in as you're listening, or wait to the end as you wish. So first things first, let me hand over to Nancy Hay to take you through the highlights of the report.
Thank you, Philippa. Hi, I'm Nancy Hay. I'm Director of Evidence and Insight with the Lloyd's Register Foundation. We're a global safety charity with the goal of engineering a safer world, and we run the World Risk Poll, which is a unique data set. So I'm going to talk you through what we found in this amazing data resource. So the Lloyd's Register Foundation runs the World Risk Poll. We've done so, this is our third one, and this year it's the second of 4 reports that we're publishing. We're interested in understanding the experience and perception of risk and safety, so what people worry about in relation to their safety and the harm that they experience from their perspective, so that we can understand the size of an issue and the reasons for it. And this is particularly important because in many areas and on many topics there isn't any other information to inform that decision making, so really unheard voices from the perspective of people who experience that harm. This is, we're speaking to 147,000 people across 142 countries with Gallup. And this report is on waste. And we've deep dived into that area because in 2017, we looked at global safety challenges generally, and the disposal of waste was a recurring theme across a number of areas. So with our collaboration with Engineering X, we looked at safer end of engineered life, and from that, we saw that open burning was a particular issue, one that we were concerned about, and about how the role of waste is a critical infrastructure for people and places. So we wanted to understand more about open burning as a priority, what drives it, and more importantly, what we can do to tackle it. So what were those opportunities to reduce and eliminate that harm? So we asked 3 questions in this study. We're looking at the type of waste people throw away, how they sort and separate it at the home, and what happens to it when it's collected and once it leaves the home. So those are what I'm going to share with you today. So firstly, we're looking at what is the most common type of waste that you dispose of, that you have in your home, the most common thing. And we asked that because it's the best way of finding out, because we don't ask about weight or volume of waste, because people are really bad at estimating. Our humans are just not very good at that. And also we often say that we're doing better than we are. So we're asking about the most common type of household waste that you dispose of. And so what we find from that globally is that the most common types of waste are plastic. 42% of waste is plastic and 38% is food waste. And if you combine those groups together, you've also got a bunch of other things that are sort of organic, so household dust and other ones, along with that food waste, and then other recyclables like cardboard and paper, cans and metal and glass at lower percentages together. So the big dominant ones are plastic and food. What we can see, though, when you look at that the percentage of different types of waste really varies by the country's income. So you can see that the food and green waste is 70% of our waste in lower income countries, and dry recyclables is much more percentage, 76% of our waste in higher income countries. And you can see that step change over the time. And we can also then start to look at differences by geography. Again, this is by region of the world in terms of the type of waste. So that pink one is that food and green waste, where that dominates in some countries, and dry recyclables in others. What we can see then from this data, that plastic and food waste are the biggest types of waste that people have, and there are big variations between country incomes and regional differences. And this matters, this context matters, particularly as waste infrastructure decisions are being made as places change and grow. So then we can look at what happens to that waste once we've got it. What do we do with it in the home? Do we separate it, particularly into sort of recyclables and non-recyclables? And the why we might do that varies across different places. Do we do it because we think it really is important to do? We care about it being separated. Do we do it because we can, or we don't do it because it's not available, or we just don't know about whether or not we should be doing this, or why? And so what we can then see are really big regional disparities in what and whether or not we separate our waste or not, or sometimes that happens. So globally, 53% of us are separating our waste and 40% of us are not, with 6% sometimes separating it. And you can see that in some parts of the world, that percentage of separation of waste is 80 to 90% of our waste is being separated. And in other parts of the world, 57% to 69% of us are not separating our waste at all. So 24 to 32% are separating our waste. And there's some big variations in between there, which represent some opportunities for change. You can again see this by country income level as well, where there are big differences between 80% of our waste being separated and 30% of our waste separated. But what was interesting to us is we also saw there were some differences by age, and we had expected younger people to be more likely to separate their waste, but this was not the case. So 47% of under 30s separated their waste compared to 60% of over 65s. And we thought this because often climate change concern is the thing that drives a lot of motivation to separate your waste, and that is higher, that climate change concern, in younger population groups. So we were surprised to find that. So what we can see is many factors influence whether or not we separate our waste, and that separation can support safer and more sustainable disposal, and it's not always available, or whether you might be able to do it is not always clear. We're also interested in what happens to waste when we leave it at home, how it's collected. So we're asked about what happens to your household waste or your garbage, what happens to it next. And we looked particularly at whether that collection of waste happens in a managed way, in an organised way, and mostly it is. So mostly it is collected by a local government, but it can also be collected by a community group or a private company. So those columns in pink there. Where we're more concerned is in those blue columns, particularly the 14% of households who burn their waste or 9% of households who dispose of it in the street, and where it can also end up just being burnt as well. And again, that distribution of that open burning is not always, is really big differences. So in some parts of the world, open burning is about 1% of waste disposal, whereas in other parts of the world it's sort of 7%, 14%, up to sort of 30 or 40% of our waste are people saying that they burn their waste. And so that distribution is not equal in terms of the size and scope of the issue. What we can see, though, when you dive down even further into that geography, is that in cities, it is much more likely that your waste will be collected in an organised way. And as soon as you get out of those cities into towns, into rural areas, the availability of collection of waste in an organised way just drops significantly outside of those urban centres. What we can then look is in more deeply in different regions within countries, and that's really interesting as well. So when we can start to look at the challenges and why things are happening in different contexts. So you can see that in Assam here, it's a remote rural region where 75% of people say that they burn their waste. And then we can also see well, the population density will be different, the infrastructure challenges will be different ones, and they're potentially looking at other places that are similar that do manage to do more to with their waste infrastructure. But there are other parts of India where there are really big differences across the different states. I'm just going to draw your attention to Delhi up in the top of the picture there, where 16% of people say that they burn their waste, and that's different challenge because this is a city place, this is an urban population, often higher density, potentially different types of waste being disposed of. So we see significant harms from open burning on health and the environment that people live in because of the pollutants that are released when that waste is burned. And that's particularly more of a problem when those types of waste are plastic or e-waste, things like that. And we can then inhale or ingest different types of pollutants that can cause illness, breathing problems, immunity, etc., but also can lead to accidental fires, contamination of the soil and water, which can lead to challenges with agricultural production and potentially economic impacts and livelihoods from that as well. So you can see there are different challenges. What this data allows us to do, though, is spot places that are similar to ourselves, that do manage to have solved this problem, or places that didn't look similar to us, and we can unlikely friends where we can start to see how we can solve this challenge and how they've created the solutions as well. And that takes us on to what we can do about the challenges. So we've put together in this report some action quadrants. So this is helping identify what the next step of change could be. So if you look at the top left of there, we've got globally 33% of us collect separated, our waste is separated and it's collected. So that pink box there is separated and collected, whereas that orange box is where it's not collected at all or it's separated, which is 24% of us globally. Those blue boxes and the green boxes suggest some places where the next step could be. So where it's blue, it's not collected but it is separated. So there's proactiveness to separate it, but it's not organised collected in an organised way, which could be an easy place to step up to get some significant change. And in that green box there, it's collected, but it's not separated. 23% of people say that, so that we can start to think about how we might be able to start separating and start recycling more in those areas. And again, you can see that breakdown across different types of country by their income level, and there's other ways of looking at that. So potentially, where are the quick wins? Where is the next step that could significantly shift harm for the better across the different parts of the world? So what we can see in that is that there are attitudinal differences and there are infrastructure changes that can happen, but that can really vary regionally, both within regions and a national context, but below that in the subnational context too. But where can we get better regional and financial equity in that waste disposal of critical infrastructure is the really exciting opportunity here. So what we done here. We've collected this data because we thought it really mattered, and we make it available as a public good because we believe the best information should inform decision making as we make decisions about what really matters to us across the world. We have the report and some great expert commentary and some examples of where change is really happening in the report. So we really encourage you to go and have a look at that. But you can also see country overview. So you can see that, like that one I did for India, but you can see that for lots of different parts of the world. You can find your country there. And if you really want to play with the data as well, our data explorer is online, and you can really start to play with that to ask questions of it yourself. And we'd love to know what sort of things you're finding, how you're using that data, but also if you're interested in partnering with us to help solve these problems, do get in touch. I really look forward to hearing the panel discussion. So here we can see what this looks like in practice. So I'm going to pass back to Philippa to pick up where we are with everybody else as well.
Thank you, Nancy. Fantastic and wonderful insight. And as you said, setting us up for the discussion. So much to talk about, those disparities between urban, rural, that surprising data around the younger households and why aren't they separating? You'd imagine from a community perspective, our younger households would be more keen to do that. So that was interesting as well. And then, of course, the sobering thought of the impact to lives from burning, open burning. I think there's a statistic around 1 million deaths per year in low-income countries that are from diseases directly attributable to mismanaged waste. So there's some interesting topics. Let us move forward so we can get to our panelists as soon as possible. So the first question then, I'm going to take this to Takahiro-san, if I may. So the poll data clearly shows the big disparities between waste management practice in different global regions and country income groups. So what global policies or frameworks are needed then, and how can international cooperation be strengthened to address these disparities? And I said that's to Takahiro-san, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. And UNEP and then ISWA published the Global Waste Management Outlook 2020 for this year. And in this report, we just really advocated that the world should really move to the more circular economy-based waste management. So for us, that in the global scale, whatever the stage of the waste management in different countries, we always thought that there's a one pathway really to move. And at the same time, the different countries and the different regions have a different waste management situation, as the World Risk Poll indicated. So we thought that the maybe kind of really global platform or global mechanism to really share the experiences of what the different regions doing and the different countries are doing, so that the different levels of the waste management can learn with each other and try to really skip some of the steps and then move forward their waste management system to the more circular the waste management system. So we thought that this kind of really global exchange of information, data, as well as the kind of really learning mechanism would be a kind of really important thing coming out of the reports.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to ask this question to both Carlos and Vishal, if I may, because I think it's something you both want to comment on. And this shows, this talks to the data showing a clear correlation between higher rates of collection and lower rates of open burning. But, and again, back to my experience, in the absence of municipal collection, whether that's municipal collection that's been outsourced to a private company or that they've done it themselves, in lower income settings, what's the role of community initiatives then and the informal sector in delivering safe and sustainable waste management? Can I start with you, Vishal, on that one?
Sure. Thank you so much. So I think in most rural parts of the Indian Himalayan region, there is absolutely no waste collection by anybody. Like there's no contractor, there's no municipality, there's no rural administration providing any access to waste collection. So the presentation showed about 32% and 44% burning, open burning in Uttarakhand and Himachal. So I think that data is people who are directly open burning their waste. But the rest of them who are not burning in the open, they're actually dumping it in the open, and somebody else is burning that waste at some point of time. So a lot more waste is actually getting burnt in the open than what people end up burning by themselves. So, in terms of the role of communities, I think that's critical, because when the local administration is unable to deliver service, I think it's only when there's a demand from the community when the service delivery can happen. And we've seen some great examples of especially women, in the mountain communities coming forward and saying they're willing to take ownership of waste collection services. So they actually have learned to drive a vehicle. They have started offering waste collection services. The village administration has provided them with a small shed to segregate waste. And there's been pockets of such, kind of community resilience movements that have come up across, multiple locations that we work in. So I think that's been possible only because the communities took the first, 5-10 steps, and then the administration started taking, the first few steps. And now then all of the stakeholders kind of align. The political ecosystem starts getting in aligned. The administrative system gets aligned, as well as the local communities and the local entrepreneurs. So I think overall, only when all stakeholders align is a solution going to be workable. Otherwise, it's not enough for just communities to do to take initiative, because they can't do the entire cycle, right, of waste collection, segregation, infrastructure, processing, and it's complicated, right? So much of waste that we generate is actually low value or negative value. Multi-layered plastics are non-recyclable by design. So what can the communities do for such products which they are being flushed with? So I think communities are a starting point for triggering the other stakeholders into action. And within that, I think we've seen women and youth kind of being the champions and agents of change.
Fantastic. And a good segue, if I can, then to you, Carlos. So how can this informal waste management collection process community activity, how is that better integrated into more formal waste management systems?
No, that's really, really important, Philippa. Thanks for this question. And we first, I would say, like, we need to realize that getting rid of the waste we generate every day is a kind of like a personal demand elsewhere. So first thing individuals want is like when they put their waste out of their door or at the curbside, like the waste simply disappear. So usually people don't care how it's handled after it's taken from their doorsteps. So this is something that we really need to realize and highlight, that there is a whole system behind making the waste disappear from our doorsteps. So it's not only collecting, but really having it integrated to transportation, sorting plants, and then having a final adequate final disposal. According to the Global Waste Management Outlook 2024, in 2020, 2.7 billion people in the world lack of access of this basic waste collection service. So this is huge, and this is causes, as Vishal mentioned, the impacts of open burning directly at the courtyards or like in the curbside, or even afterwards, because it's removed out of the doors, or it's like a dump it into rivers and like a water bodies. So first of all, I would say like we need to really reinforce the need that everybody understands that this service is a basic human right. Recently, the United Nations General Assembly approved the right for a clean and healthy environment as a basic human right. And we also need to bring, to uncover the misperception that those practices are like a free of charge, because they are causing, I would say, like several and strong impacts, not only to the environment, but also to people's health. So coming back to your question, it's very important to integrate the informal sector as a more formalized way under integrated waste management, and not only as part of this task just to remove waste out of the doors, because then it will create other problems.
So can I link then? I'm going to come to Takahiro-san now, because I want to link to what you've just said. So is there a role for international cooperation to strengthen support needed by these countries who haven't got that mature in their waste management practices? They're limited, aren't they, to their waste management infrastructure and the investment ability to build that. So what role does international cooperation or should it play, Takahiro-san, in helping support that?
Yeah, just before speaking about the international cooperation related issues, we are having a little bit careful about the formalization of the informal sector, because when we study the gender and the waste, we found out that in the formalization of the informal sector, majority of the women are marginalized because men get the job first and women are largely marginalized. So as the Carlos indicated, I think the important thing is the integration of the informal sector in the waste management decisions, waste management systems, so that they are properly integrated into that, whether they are formalized or whether they are really still informal. This is the kind of really very important thing for us. And when we really support the countries in establishing the waste management systems, we definitely try to really incorporate and then consider very strongly the social issues, including informal sector, the gender, and the social structure related issues. Otherwise, the waste management issues, introducing new technologies, introducing the good technologies may really have a kind of really negative impacts on the social society.
Thank you. And there's another linking question here, but I'm going to go to Nancy, if I may. There has been a number of reports over the years that I've read, but where Lloyd's Register are particularly strong is the quality of the data and the insight. How important is it that we get that data accuracy, Nancy, in terms of having these positive debates that are designed to have outcomes rather than just be a talking shop?
Yeah, I think this is really, I would say that data is really important, but I think it really matters that we know the size and scope of the problem. So how many people, to what extent it affects them, what are the reasons why, because that helps us be much more specific about what the actual issue is and who is experiencing it, and helps us identify solutions to help reduce or mitigate that risk that we've started to talk about here today. I think it can help us understand where actually some people have got this right. There were examples within the same area, same types of similar-ish countries, i.e. with geography or income or demographics, where there were quite big differences, and then we can start to learn what is happening in those areas that can help us identify the solution. So I think often this is we're collecting this data because it doesn't exist, right? And so we wanted to understand it better. So one of the things that could happen on an international collaboration way is that data starts to be collected more routinely to help us build this more systematically into our solutions as well. But I mean, really helping understand the issue specifically, the size of the harm, where it is, can really help us work out what we can do about it together or individually.
And talking to that point about sort of the value of the data and how it challenges our thinking, I think we've all said we were quite surprised at some of the findings in the data about the separation rates are lower amongst younger households in many parts of the world. And I think Latin America was called out as one of them. So how do we enable and encourage indeed better waste separation and recycling behaviours amongst the younger generation that you'd have hoped that we're more positive about this? So I'm going to go to Vishal, then I'm going to come to Carlos on that question. So it's how do we encourage younger generations to recognise the value and importance of separation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think younger people are on both sides of the spectrum, because there's a huge number of young people actually leading, climate movements and also waste separation movements across the country and the world. So it is a kind of counterintuitive insight from the study. So I think we've had, we engage very closely with youth across different age groups, both in urban and rural settings. And, we do both in classroom programs and we do out of classroom sessions. We kind of, I think, creating spaces for youth to come together and to be able to have a conversation, about the issues and what they can do. So one of the things is in general, the youth actually feel helpless when they see the problem and they see that there is no, the waste are getting dumped in the neighboring streets, right?
Mm,
So why do we segregate them? There's a sense of hopelessness in youth, and there's a sense of feeling helpless, like I can't do anything. Like even if I segregate my waste, the contractor is going to mix it, or there's nobody going to come to my house for collecting waste. So what we found useful is helping youth see that they are actually really powerful. Like they're a very powerful tool for change, and we've seen that in very very remote parts of the country, of Uttarakhand and Himachal where we work. So we actually form something called the Young Warrior Clubs, where we get like just youth together, create these spaces, get them have some games and fun activities with them, and then we've seen them taking this initiative back to their homes, and
mm,
their schools and their communities, and we've had some fantastic results, just by creating spaces for youth. And another thing is, we're also nudging youth to take, ownership of their local kind of civic issues. So if they're living in a, area, what are some things they can do to make sure that, if there's a dump site in their vicinity, instead of seeing it and feeling helpless, we nudge them to say that, can you take the first step, right? And when they start doing that, they start coming on the journey of, kind of sustainability. And we've seen, fun activities, games, uh, creativity, and spaces for youth to come together and have conversations on this, I think, are some strategies that have worked well for us in
mm,
getting youth. And actually, we've had a lot of success in getting adults to segregate through youth as well, by
mm,
getting them to send messages. We've actually had some youth send really cute messages to even the political administration, uh, you know, uh, to the mayor, saying, can you please provide us with some waste collection services in our areas? And
mm,
so I think youth are definitely very powerful, and we need to be able to help them see that in some cases if they're feeling helpless and hopeless. So
mm.
again, it's a very counterintuitive insight from the study,
It is.
but I think
Yeah.
youth are on all ends of the spectrum.
But of value. So just to bring Carlos into the conversation, so just refer back to, so the question is, how do we enable and encourage better waste separation and recycling behaviours, particularly in younger generations?
Yes, I'd say like I second Vishal's vision on that, and what we are looking and like researching about these like new generations behaviors is that like youth and young generations, they are looking for cause. I would say their pillars is to work for a purpose. It's not like for materials or goods anymore, but for a
Mm,
cause. And we are still failing to show them the perception that when it's related to waste management, every action counts. Because this is kind of like when we lack of services, when we try to stimulate source separation of waste, but then you don't have infrastructures available to really recover this waste as a resource, to really transform the waste as a secondary raw material or some other benefits. It's kind of like really destimulating these new generations to do something. So and I would say like it's part of a mentality from the past century, that waste is trash, waste is garbage, and like no
mm,
matter what I do, it will be dumped. And like we really need to bring this perception that the paradigm shift is here to make the difference. That we need to move from waste as garbage to waste as a resource. This is the message from the Global Waste Management Outlook.
mm,
And what we are advocating for, what I've been advocating for since we were preparing this publication, and like mostly after it was released, is like we need a global push. We really need to engage the different generations, the different stakeholders. You're not only blaming the governments because they don't give us the service as they should be, but also bringing producers to this table. And I agree with Vishal that the young generation's youth have a big power on that to change the movement, to start reflecting and making this change happen, because we have the information, we have the ability to do things, and we have this consciousness that like if we don't do anything, the problem will be huge, and it won't be affordable for us as well. It's not like for my grandchildren, it's for us. We won't be, if we don't change this paradigm now, we won't be able to afford the costs of the waste management, I would say, by 2040, 2050, as it's shown in the publication.
Mm. And you know, where we're fortunate in the power of social media and channels is that ability for those voices to be shared around the world and to be able to give examples of things that have worked. I remember seeing a very successful project in Johannesburg around the use of car tires and the value that could be taken from that. And you know, you take that story and you can share that globally in a second. So I think that that's really powerful. I'm kind of still related to the topic of how we influence and move change. And we've got around 4 or 5 minutes or so before we're going to go to the questions that are coming in. But let me come to Nancy, if I can, and then Takahiro-san with the same question. And it's really talking to public policy and systematic change. I mean, the data that we're getting from the World Risk Poll should be used to raise public awareness. We've talked about that. But how can it influence behaviour and public policy and systematic change? Can we start with you, Nancy?
Thank you. I was a former policy official, so this is a great question that I really care about. So I think we need to make it easy to do the right thing, and I really loved the description that Vishal was saying there about people feeling a bit helpless. There's no matter what I do, it doesn't make a difference, or Carlos is talking about there being a purpose to this. So I think there are other outcomes that policymakers really care about the health of their populations, the economic self-sufficiency of the agriculture and the livelihoods that people have, that really do drive other outcomes. I mean, you described them, Philippa, about the health benefits and the safety benefits more broadly of a safe, clean place. And so I think looking at how it can build into other outcomes that policymakers care about, and also helping us put some values of the scale of the impact and also the scale of the benefits that could be realised. So in the economic valuation, the business cases that we do, but also I think stimulating different sectors. We saw that the community response in some places is good. Sometimes it's the business sector, sometimes it's the producers, sometimes it's the government responding. So this is a space for cross-national effort. I think there's also a role for national statistical officers and other types of data providers to collect this information about how we look after our waste in a really innovative ways. And there's exciting ways that we can do that, from measuring, using technology to measure the waste that we do as well. So I think there's lots of potential for collaboration on the policy side, as well as in the action within local communities.
Fantastic. Takahiro-san, would you like to comment at all on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the UNEP cooperated with this the World Risk Poll this time because we also wanted to really know the behavior of the household or individuals in terms of the waste management. And when we really push, I think Carlos also mentioned about the paradigm shift to more waste as a resource, or other kind of avoiding any the problematic waste from the beginning, then we need to really see how the waste the household is really behaving in terms of the waste management, or how they perceive waste in their household. I think this risk poll report was very clear. At the moment, many of the households still consider waste as a waste, causing problems in their household. not consider that the waste as kind of really good resources for them. So in order
Thank
to
you.
really change the behavioral changes, I think we have to really show that waste is the resource, but in which way and the how do we really get benefit of waste for their own life.
Mm.
In order to do that, for me, the first step is waste segregation. I think the report was really showing we already know that without the segregation, not proper recycling, not proper the use
Mm.
of the waste for our own benefits. If we really don't push the waste segregation at the household, it's very
Mm.
difficult to really give the ownership of the waste management on the household.
Yeah.
So we try to really see the kind of, for me, the behavioral change is moving from the current waste to waste as resources. And in order to do that, first step for me is waste segregation at the household level.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Listen, it is 2:42 here in the UK, so we are going to move to your questions. I'm now going to appear like an elegant swan on the surface of a pond with legs panting quickly underneath in terms of managing these all questions as they come in. But I have got one here, uh, simple but very profound question. And I'm going to go, if I may, to Carla on this. How do we address richer countries dumping their collected garbage on the poorer?
That's exactly one of the problems we identified when looking the researching about waste data around the world about this transshipment of waste considered as like a goods to from one country to another. So this is something I would say like it's already addressed by many regulations, and we really need to make the enforcement happen. And this is one of the, I would say, the current failures of the waste management system that we have in place in many countries and internationally and globally. We lack of enforcement. When we researched about waste regulations, there are many countries, and I would say like many developing countries with national legislations prohibiting open dumping of wastes. There are many countries supporting source separation, supporting recycling of waste, but in fact, it doesn't happen. It's not enforced. It's like it doesn't happen on the ground. So this is one of the main issues we are trying to address on this like international cooperation with the publication. And now the numbers and figures from the poll supports that there is a need to urgently address this enforcement part. As a practical example on this specific case, the world is now going to the final meeting to discuss an international legally binding instrument to beat plastic pollution. This is, I would say, like a hit topic on everybody's agenda. And late November, there will be this meeting in Busan in South Korea. So there are, I would say, like all member states, all countries around the table to discuss about it. And one of the topics that is still being discussed is about moving plastics or plastic waste or plastic material from one country to another. If we don't take this topic very seriously and understand that we need to incorporate at the global level the polluter pays principle, we will keep failing. So it's very, very important that we use the instruments we already have in front of us, the instrument and the tools we already have available in order to tackle this problem.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a lot of questions coming in. There's some certainly common themes. One of the things, interestingly, and it's related to this issue of dumping waste at richer countries, developing countries, in that it doesn't show up in the World Risk Poll data. So, What other ways, Nancy, have we got in terms of supporting these situations where it's not necessarily data exists?
Yeah, so the gap we were trying to fill, because we spotted there was a gap, was about household waste behaviours and how we did that as well. But there is also, like you say, other data gaps that could potentially be filled by other people or in partnership as well. I see Takahiro-san has his hand up on this one as well, who may also have a response.
Thank you.
I think the UNEP published together with Interpol about environmental crime, and we also collected the data about, we call it the illegal trafficking of the waste, and we found out that much of the waste has been really imported or exported under the name of the secondary products. Those are kind of really very difficult issue at the moment in the international arena, because it's actually waste. At the same time, it was transported to the third countries under the name of the secondary the products. And basically, this kind of really secondary products, the movement has lots of problems in terms of the data collection. At the same time, we also try to really find out and comparing the trade data with waste data and also material flow data within the countries. So there are some the data collection systems, and then if some of the data is already included in the UNEP material flow database, including the materials flow from one country to the other. The other data cap we found, particularly is the household data, because nobody can go to each household to really collect data in terms of amount or in terms of really the composition of the waste. So this time, for us, it's a really fast, globally, really coordinated data collection at the household level. At the same time, we also try to really see more of the data coming from the household to influence a household behavior. So those are kind of really things that I would like to really emphasize.
Thank you. Very interesting. So it's an interesting it's coming from a country from Yemen, but this person has said, as you said, thank you for your question, how countries like his with really big waste management issues and this thing around limited resource infrastructure, how do they access expertise and support? I think Carlos and Takahiro-san let's start with you, Carlos. So how do they access expertise and support?
Well, there are many platforms available out there. I would say like ISVA, the International Solid Waste Association, has a knowledge hub about waste, a very comprehensive group of materials from our 50 years, more than 50 years of existence in terms of research and knowledge and like guidelines, roadmaps. Also, the many figures and data, and we also have like a frequent webinars. We just closed our annual congress in Cape Town in South Africa with like 160 presentations in different sessions. So the knowledge is out there. I would say the knowledge is out there. We are working with UNEP ITC to have like an online platform compiling waste data and like resources about good practices. Also, as I am a member of the United Nations Secretary General's Advisory Board on Zero Waste, we have like an open call to receive good practices and initiatives on zero waste that we also publish it on online and influence and stimulate best practices and like a new cases. So I would say there are many sources of knowledge out there to influence this behavioral change and paradigm shift. The missing link for me is still like it's not mainstream. It's still a niche. It's still kind of like a conversation when you have like a specific events or meetings. It's not something that it's already moving people towards this direction. When we talk about like a climate change, now we see the many weather impacts we are seeing in different parts of the world. So people are getting moved about that, but they are still not getting touched about like a better waste management. So we really need to have all these figures and all these numbers together to compatibilize what is available out there, and to show that if we don't have like a, if we don't start with ourselves, if we don't start with like individual actions, and if we don't move and engage our governments, companies, producers, and industries worldwide, we still have like single-use materials. We still have leftovers from like supermarkets and restaurants, and it's causing a major problem to the world.
Absolutely. So thank you. I'm going to go to Michelle because I know you've had your hand up. So I'm going to go to you to have your input, and then I've got a question for you straight after.
Sure. So I just want to add to what Carlos said, and also just to answer the question that I think the knowledge is there. The missing piece is also like we need people on the ground, right? The administration wants to do good, they don't have the technical know-how. They don't, like, there are funders who are willing to fund such initiatives, but they don't know exactly how to fund or what to fund, which point in the value chain they need to actually fund. The recycling infrastructure, at least in India, for example, it exists and it's really good, the recycling infrastructure. But unfortunately, a lot of some of these recycling plants and industries actually only deal with imported waste. They don't even accept, Indian waste. It's easier for them, cheaper for them to actually import waste than to process the waste that gets collected in India. So
Exactly.
that's one part of the problem. But the missing piece in all of this, that the knowledge is there, and also it's not rocket science, right? Like, in terms of, if you're a downstream player, right, who needs to provide waste collection, managing and transporting it to a authorized, processor, right? So that piece doesn't really require, it's not rocket science, but it requires resilience. It requires working with communities, winning their trust, making friends. It requires overcoming their objections, because none of the community members want a waste processing plant to be set up next to where their homes are, right? Every single plant we have set up, the communities have come and protested outside the plant that no, we do not want a facility here. While everybody knows that infrastructure is a problem, but still communities are protesting against infrastructure. So, and that lack of trust between communities and local administration requires somebody to work on the ground. So whoever asked that question, I
Absolutely.
think the knowledge is available. What is missing is we need people on the ground who are willing to put their blood, sweat, and tears, winning the trust of community, winning the trust of local administration, and acting as a
Absolutely.
bridge in
It's a real
transferring that knowledge.
communication thing. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I'm going to go because you partly answered the question I was going to ask you, but I'm going to go, if I may, to Nancy, and we're heading towards our last 5 minutes. Was there any further analysis into how waste is disposed of, and whether it is and where it is neither collected or burned, as this person is aware of some countries where household waste is buried and often surfaces again quite soon. So the question is, was there any further analysis into how waste is disposed in your report?
So we were looking at those three things: the type of waste that people had, the whether they separated it, and then how it was collected. Obviously, I focused in on the open burning because that had what had prompted our interest in this area, and we wanted more information that didn't already exist to find out. There is a whole, what happens to it once it is collected is a really good question. So, and it also affects whether or not we bother separating it. So if you know there's no point in separating your waste because it all gets put together and just put into landfill, that's another reason why you might not bother to do it. So this particular data set doesn't. There is information out there on other sorts of what happens to it in the industry more broadly, but it can affect like whether or not it's even worth bothering to separate it because you don't know, it just gets buried elsewhere, is a really good question. And actually I think it can affect how we deal with it at the household level as well.
Absolutely. I kind of related around data, and you might know the answer, but possibly Carlos may do. So this person says, I live in an area that separated waste and it's collected by local government, but anecdotally, I've heard that a very low amount of separated recycled actually gets recycled, and the majority of it is going to landfill. Lindsay's asked the local council for data on this, but it's not been provided. Is it something that they have to provide? Should local councils provide that data? And Carlos is nodding. Let me go to you.
I would say yes, absolutely yes, because it's kind of like a public health and environmental issue, an environmental agenda, and this data should be available for every citizen in the local territory, and also this data should be part of like a broader data system in like a regional level or national level to support decision making in terms of like public policies and in terms of investments. This is what we are talking about, because it's not like the mayor's money, the mayor's pocket is like a local authority, is like the individuals, the citizens. So it's kind of like we really need to bring this mentality on board. It's like when it's related to household waste, municipal waste is a matter that affects us all.
It should be shared. Thank you. I'm going to come to Vishal. I love this question from this person. Says the reason of youngsters answering in a different way than expected could be an insight that we're dealing with the main waste issues in the same way without big innovation. When thinking about the only way for lower medium income countries is to become a follower of high income countries and their practices. So this person is saying, is it a sign that something must be done differently? It seems to be we're trying to sell fixed telephones in the era of smart devices. How do you see that, Vishal?
uh, Honestly speaking, I think at least in India, I think we're doing much better than some of the Western countries, because most of them are just shipping out their waste to other parts of the world and have very little infrastructure for processing their waste in-house. So I don't think we're actually following the trend of the West, or the developed nations. I think there is a lot of innovation happening when it comes to waste. I mean, innovation at every level is happening. There's technology for a material which is non-recyclable by design is being converted into something as cool products, that's being sold in the market. They're converting into furniture. They're converting it into, tires are being used to make parks. So I think there is no dearth of innovation that's happening in the waste management space. There's use of AI technology for waste segregation at the material recovery facilities. There's all kinds of data, satellite data that's being used to track, methane emissions from landfills. And that's that's driving behavior change for city action plans for urban local bodies. So there is no dearth of innovation that's happening in the
No,
in the developing nations, and youth are playing a big role in that innovation. But I don't think we should look at innovation for the sake of innovation, for trying to make it look cool, right? I think it
yeah,
needs to work. It needs to be
agreed.
effective. And for that, we need infrastructure for processing. You need local entrepreneurs providing reliable service, and communities, I think, have to also take ownership of, demanding for solutions. So I think
I
all of
agree.
that is required.
I agree. Thank you. And I'm only interrupted because we're kind of out of time. I could continue talking with this panel for another few hours. So unfortunately, we are out of time. We are going to follow up on all of the questions. So please don't think if you put a question that hasn't been answered, we will come back to you. Thank you so much for the panelists. What a great discussion. As I said, we could have carried on. Thank you all for attending. And now, as Nancy said, the full report, all the underlying data can be explored in the World Risk Poll website. And you can get in touch with the team, of course, if you've got any particular questions or you might want to talk about partnering. Once you leave the webinar, you're going to get a short feedback survey. We'd love it if you could just take a couple of minutes just to fill it in, because we'd love to know how you felt the webinar went and any other questions you might have. And of course, we can provide a link, a recording of the event. So on behalf of the Lloyd's Register Foundation and my esteemed panelists, thank you so much for your time and attention today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.